The police showed up at my house because I was sitting on my own porch. At first, I thought there had been some kind of emergency. Then I saw who was standing beside the patrol car. Karen, the president of our HOA. She was pointing directly at my house. And apparently, she had told the police that I was violating HOA rules by using my own front porch. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But what Karen didn't know was that I had already started researching the history of the HOA, and that research was about to uncover something she desperately wanted to keep buried. I had bought my house 2 years earlier. It was a quiet property at the edge of the neighborhood, with a wide front porch overlooking a small garden. The porch had been there long before the HOA was created. I spent most evenings sitting outside with a cup of coffee, reading or watching the sunset. Nobody had ever complained. Until Karen became HOA president. Her name was Karen Whitmore. She was extremely strict about community rules. Trash cans had to be placed in exactly the right location. Lawns had to be cut on specific days. Mailboxes had to match approved designs. And apparently, people weren't supposed to sit on their own porches after certain hours. I received my first notice on a Tuesday. It claimed my porch furniture was creating an unauthorized change in the appearance of the property. The furniture consisted of 2 wooden chairs and a small table. I removed nothing. Instead, I checked my property documents. The porch was clearly part of my property. Then I checked the HOA bylaws. There was nothing banning porch furniture. I sent Karen a polite response asking her to identify the specific rule I had violated. She never answered. Instead, 2 weeks later, she came to my house. She stood at the bottom of my steps and told me I needed to stop using the porch. I asked why. She said, because the HOA controls the exterior appearance of every home. I asked her to show me the rule. She couldn't, so I told her I would continue using my porch. She left furious. 3 days later, the police arrived. 2 officers walked up my driveway. Karen was behind them. She immediately pointed toward my porch and said, "That's where it's violating the community restrictions." One officer looked at the porch. Then he looked at me. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" "Yes." He asked whether I had damaged anything or entered someone else's property. "No." He looked back at Karen. She tried explaining that the HOA had authority over the property. The officer politely told her that a disagreement over HOA rules was generally a civil matter. Karen wasn't happy, but she eventually left. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The next morning, I started digging. I pulled the original HOA formation documents from the county records. I reviewed amendments. I checked board records. And then I noticed something strange. Karen's name appeared in an older set of documents. Not as president, not even as a board member. She had been involved in a previous dispute concerning the HOA's authority over homeowners. I kept reading. Several years earlier, Karen had challenged another homeowner over an exterior property issue. The dispute had escalated into a legal case, and the court documents contained an important detail. The court had rejected an argument that the HOA could enforce restrictions beyond the authority actually granted by its governing documents. In other words, Karen already knew that the HOA couldn't simply invent rules. That changed everything. I kept investigating the public records. I discovered that Karen had also previously served on a committee that proposed several amendments to the HOA rules. One of those amendments had been rejected by the membership. And guess what that amendment would have done? It would have given the HOA broader control over exterior structures, including porches. The rule she was now trying to enforce had never actually been adopted. Karen knew it. The board record showed it. And the court documents showed that she had previously been involved in a dispute over exactly this kind of authority. I didn't accuse her of anything criminal. I didn't need to. I simply gathered the documents. Then I requested a formal HOA board meeting. Karen arrived expecting me to apologize. Instead, I placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of the governing documents, meeting minutes, the rejected amendment, and the relevant public court records. I looked at Karen and asked one question. Can you show me where the rule banning my porch use actually exists? She didn't answer. One board member picked up the original bylaws. Another opened the meeting minutes. Then someone asked Karen why she had told the police that the HOA had authority over my porch. She said she believed the rule existed. I slid the rejected amendment across the table. This is a rule you're talking about." She looked at it, then looked away. The room went completely quiet. The board eventually voted to withdraw the violation against me. They also agreed that no homeowner should be reported to law enforcement simply because of a disputed HOA rule unless there was an actual safety or legal emergency. But there was one more surprise. Several homeowners asked for an independent review of the HOA's records, and during that review, they discovered that multiple old rules had been described as approved in neighborhood communications even though they had never been properly adopted. Karen resigned from her presidency shortly afterward, not because anyone had accused her of a crime, but because the board had lost confidence in her judgment. A few weeks later, I was sitting on my porch again. Same 2 wooden chairs, same little table, same sunset. Only this time, nobody was telling me I wasn't allowed to be there. One of my neighbors walked past and laughed. He said, "Looks like the most dangerous thing on this porch is your coffee." I laughed too, because the entire situation had started over 2 chairs and a table, but it ended by exposing something much bigger. HOA rules only have authority when they are actually supported by the governing documents and applicable law. A title like HOA president doesn't give someone unlimited power, and calling the police doesn't magically turn a neighborhood disagreement into a criminal case. Karen thought the badge in the police officer's hand would settle the argument. Instead, it forced everyone to look at the documents. And once the documents were on the table, her version of the story couldn't survive. The porch never changed. The rules did. And the biggest lesson I learned was simple. Before you argue with someone who claims to have authority over your property, ask them to show you where that authority actually comes from.